Okay, ready to dive in. We've got some really interesting stuff to unpack today about HR.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's got an opinion on HR these days.
Well, and that's kind of what we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
Two articles, two very different takes on why HR might be struggling. We've got one from, let me make sure I pronounce this right, Sylvia Ola over at the Contrarian HR blog.
She's always got some spicy takes.
And then we've got the Atlantic piece by Mike Pesca, and they both get into this idea of like, is HR failing? And if so, why?
What I find fascinating is how they both kind of circle around this question of like, is it who is in HR that's the problem? Like, is there something about the makeup of HR departments that's holding them back?
Yeah, so let's start with Sylvia Ola's piece. She kind of throws down the gauntlet right from the start.
Oh, yeah, she doesn't hold back.
She's pointing out that HR is overwhelmingly female, like 70 to 80% women, and even more striking, 78% of CHROs are women. And her argument is that this has led to what she calls a dominance of feminine energy in HR.
Which, she argues, doesn't always mesh well with the business world.
Right? She's saying, like, is that clashing with what she calls the masculine nature of business?
And she kind of dances around this question, but it's definitely there. Does having so many women in HR make it harder for the department to be seen as, strong or effective?
Especially, like you said, in business world that's maybe not the most evolved when it comes to gender equality,
Yeah, there's definitely still some work to be done there.
for sure. And then you've got the Atlantic piece, which takes a totally different approach. Mike Pesca is looking at it through this political lens, drawing a parallel between HR and the Democratic Party.
It's an interesting comparison, right? Because you can see how some people might lump them together in terms of their focus on things like, I don't know, fairness, inclusion, rules.
Yeah, he talks about how HR is often characterized by, this emphasis on norms, procedures, DEI initiatives, things like that. And he's suggesting that HR is being perceived through that same lens as the Democratic Party, like maybe inheriting some of the same, I don't know, baggage, you could say.
Yeah, like maybe some of the same criticisms, the same stereotypes, and it makes you wonder, right? Is that fair?
Totally. And he throws out some pretty, I guess you could say, eye-opening stats. Like, did you know that HR professionals overwhelmingly donated to Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in the last election?
I did not know that.
Yeah. And he also points out that demographically, HR professionals tend to align with Democratic voters. So we're talking more college educated, younger, more likely to be Black or Hispanic. So again, it's kind of painting this picture of HR as a pretty, how do you say, homogenous group, both politically and demographically.
And that raises some questions, right? Because on the one hand, you could argue that more diversity of thought, more diversity of experience in HR could actually be a good thing.
Absolutely. Like, wouldn't that help them better understand and serve a diverse workforce?
Right. But then there's the flip side. If there's this perception that HR is aligned with one specific political party, could that create distrust, even resentment among employees who don't share those views?
That's such a good point. Like, does that then impact how HR policies are perceived, even if those policies are on the surface, neutral?
Exactly. It definitely makes you think about how much those personal beliefs and affiliations might be influencing things, even subconsciously.
Okay, so we've got these two pieces,
Yeah,
right? One saying HR is too feminine, the other suggesting it's too democratic. It's almost like they're two sides of the same coin, in a way.
it really is, because they both seem to be saying that HR is failing to connect with, well, somebody, right?
Mm.
Whether it's the people at the top making decisions or the employees themselves. And it's because of who HR is, or at least who they're perceived to be.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting. Because if it is about perception, how do you change that? Like, can you actually shift those deeply ingrained stereotypes about HR?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something that goes way beyond just HR. We're talking about societal perceptions of gender, of politics, of power. It's a lot to unpack. And it gets even more interesting when you start to think about the content of those criticisms of HR. Like, it's too focused on rules, too bureaucratic, not focused enough on results. Those are almost word for word the stereotypes you hear about women, about the Democratic Party.
Whoa, that's a good point. It's like those stereotypes are bleeding over into how HR is perceived, even if they're not actually true. Makes you wonder if they're being held to a different standard than other departments.
Right. Like, is it even possible for HR to shake those perceptions, or are they just baked into the role itself?
Sylvia Ola really goes there in her piece. She argues that those traditional feminine qualities, like empathy, nurturing, focusing on relationships, those can actually be strengths in HR. But at the same time, she acknowledges those same qualities might be seen as weaknesses in the business world.
Yeah, the business world still often values assertiveness and competition over everything else.
It's like she's saying HR is in this impossible double bind. Be nurturing and tough, empathetic and results-oriented. How do you even do that?
And don't forget, HR often deals with, well, kind of the messy stuff, enforcing rules, mediating conflicts, sometimes having to deliver bad news. It's not all, team building exercises and birthday cake.
Definitely not. But then on top of that, you have this growing expectation that HR should be handling things like well-being initiatives, mental health support, creating a more, how do they put it, human-centered workplace.
Which, ironically, often requires a lot of those so-called feminine qualities, empathy, emotional intelligence, that kind of thing.
So HR has to be the enforcer and the therapist, and all while trying to prove their worth in a language that business understands. Numbers, results, the bottom line.
Exactly, which brings us back to that question of leadership style. If those masculine and feminine qualities are valuable in HR, how do we create an environment where they can both exist and even thrive?
Is it about finding leaders who can embody both? Or is it about having teams with a wider range of skills and perspectives?
I think it's both, to be honest. And it gets at the core of what needs to change, not just in HR, but in the whole business world. If we want workplaces that are truly effective and inclusive, we have to get past those rigid gender stereotypes. There's not just one way to be a good leader.
It feels like the most important question is, why does any of this even matter? Why should anyone outside of HR care about these issues?
Because when HR isn't working well, the whole organization suffers.
Makes sense.
It impacts hiring, retention, morale, even the overall culture of the company. So it's not just an HR problem, it's a business problem.
And a problem we need to understand if we want to build better workplaces. Places where everyone feels valued and can do their best work.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Creating workplaces that are both successful and, actually good places to be.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems, the stereotypes, the perception issues. But what about solutions? Where do we go from here? How do we start to make those changes we've been talking about?
Well, I think step one is awareness, right? Recognizing that these biases exist and that they have real consequences.
So like just being aware of those stereotypes and how they might be playing out in our workplaces.
Exactly. And then having those uncomfortable conversations and talking about how those biases might be impacting how we view and value HR.
And not just like whispering about it in the break room. These need to be open, honest conversations happening at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, from the CEO down to the newest hire. Because if we want real change, it's going to take a collective effort.
It's on everyone to create a more equitable and effective workplace, not just HR.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the culture.
And that creating a more human-centered workplace is actually good for everyone. It's good for employees, it's good for the company, it's good for, well, society as a whole.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from that zero-sum game mentality and recognizing that when we support each other, when we create a more inclusive and equitable workplace, everyone benefits.
Love that. So it sounds like what we're really talking about here is a shift in mindset, a move away from those old, outdated ways of thinking about work and leadership.
It's about recognizing that there's not just one right way to do things. There's not just one way to lead. There's not just one way to build a successful company. And that embracing that diversity of thought, that diversity of experience, is actually what's going to help us create a better future of work for everyone.
It's like expanding the definition of what it even means to be successful in the business world. Maybe success isn't just about the bottom line. Maybe it's also about creating a workplace where people can thrive.
And where they feel valued and respected and supported, because at the end of the day, people want to do work that matters. They want to work for companies that align with their values.
And if companies want to attract and retain top talent, they need to start paying attention to those needs. They need to create workplaces that are more than just, a place to punch in and punch out.
They need to create workplaces that are actually, humane.
Humanity in the workplace. What a concept.
Revolutionary, I know.
Yeah.
But seriously, I think that's what we're all striving for, right? To create a world where work is more than just a means to an end, where it's actually a source of meaning and purpose and, dare I say, even joy.
Okay, I'm sold. Sign me up for that revolution.
You and me both. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take all of us working together.
So to our listeners out there, What are your thoughts on all of this? What resonated with you? What questions are you still grappling with?
We encourage you to check out those full articles from the Contrarian HR and the Atlantic. You can find the links in the episode description.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, keep the conversation going, because ultimately the future of work depends on all of us.
Absolutely. So share this episode with a friend, tell us what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more deep dives into the world of work. Thanks for listening.
It's like we've been talking about this huge, complex system, right? And we're just starting to see all the interconnected pieces.
Yeah, and how everything kind of feeds back into itself. It's not just about HR. It's about how we view work, leadership, gender, even politics. It's all connected.
And like, what stuck with me is how much of this comes down to perception, right? If people have this fixed idea of what HR is, what it does, it's going to be really hard for HR to break out of that box.
It's almost like HR needs a whole rebranding campaign. Like HR, not just the rural police anymore.
Seriously. But maybe part of that rebranding is acknowledging that tension we talked about, that push and pull between structure and, that more human-centered approach.
Because it doesn't have to be either, right? You can have an HR department that's both data-driven and compassionate, focused on compliance, but also on creating a positive employee experience.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance, where HR can be a strategic partner and an advocate for employees.
Right, and maybe it's also about realizing that the future of HR is going to look different from the past. It's going to need new skills, new approaches, maybe even a whole new mindset.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I kind of want to throw it back to you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on all of this? What resonated? What questions are you still thinking about?
Definitely check out the full articles from the Contrarian HR and the Atlantic. We'll link them in the episode description.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts. Keep the conversation going. Because figuring out the future of work, that's on all of us.
It really is. So share this episode, tell us what you think, and hit subscribe to The Deep Dive for more deep dives on, well, everything work-related. Thanks for listening.